let everybody know about. I did send out an email, so that was a little preview, but the first thing and most important, I think that everybody wants to know is the code word for today is being. We are going to be talking about mindfulness, and I thought that would be an appropriate word because we are human beings, not human doings. So let's all be mindful today, but being is the word for today. So if you lose connection, you're going to want to email Autumn. I know in the past it's been Wendy, and Wendy has moved on, and so Autumn is helping out today, and I will have her email in the chat, but make sure you write it down, because if you lose connection, you won't have it in the chat anymore. So I will put that in the chat for you to have. That, and then also, we want to let you know that the recordings that we've had this list of past recordings, and that they will be accessible until the end of the year. So if you wanted to go back and watch a recording or get, stuff off of that, please do so before the end of the year, because then they will be no longer. So make sure you grab those. From starting today with this presentation, we are going to be posting these recordings to our YouTube channel. And I have updated those guidelines that I send out every month with the flyer. So make sure that you save the guidelines that I sent for this month, because that's going to have your link to the YouTube channel. It's just this, Children's Justice Center YouTube channel. So even if you Googled it, you'd probably find it, but that's the link that you want to use, going forward. And, so basically it's going to be a little bit easier for you to get to. It won't be as confusing, I think. So we'll be doing that. And, I forgot to ask you, Doug, was I able to get your slides from you? Will I be able to get those?
Yeah, I will send them to you.
Yeah, okay. So we'll be sending those out afterwards until all the people that have attended the training today. So I think that's it. Other than just remember to catch that link at the end of the training so you can get your CEUs. Autumn will start putting that in the chat about a quarter till. So make sure that you grab that link, or you go ahead and just click into it and fill out the evaluation to get your CEUs. So that's all still the same. Okay, I think we got it covered. I'm really, really excited to introduce Doug today. This is Dr. Douglas Wendt, and he is coming to us from UVU. He's an associate professor there. He's going to be teaching us about something we all talk about, but we don't do, and that is mindfulness. And I'm so excited because I need this so bad. The reminders are great. So I'm going to turn the time over to him, and he can take it away. Thanks, Doug.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kelly. I'm so excited to be here. I am actually joining you from Montreal. I am here with my niece and nephew and sister-in-law and brother, and we are just spending time. We just celebrated Canadian Thanksgiving. I'm not Canadian, but I have Canadian relatives. And so if I look a little bit like I'm in that lethargic holiday state, maybe that's helpful for mindfulness. maybe that's distracting. I don't know. Let's be present with whatever it is. I'm so excited to go over this. I just to introduce me very briefly, as Kelly said, I'm a PhD in LCSW. I teach in the program of social work in the, let's see, we just changed our department name, Social and Behavioral Sciences Department at UVU. But I have a PhD in marriage and family therapy. So I cut across those two worlds, and I really like integrating from within those two worlds. My own experience with mindfulness is probably less than anyone here. So if you're like, what qualifies this guy to talk about it? Nothing. I'm not qualified in that sense. And so if this is the moment you want to log off, that's okay. That's totally, I won't be offended. On a deeper sense, and I hope this resonates with many of you, I feel like I'm qualified to talk about mindfulness as a human being. And I hope that those of you who are like, well, how can I do this? In my own, challenges or imperfections or limitations, I hope you would just slow down and embrace that. So I'm going to give a quick overview looking at that. Um, there are two groups that I'm concerned about here, not in the sense of these are bad groups, but just, I think these are typically the two groups when there's any training like this. First group is like, I already know this stuff. I've done all of the CEs on mindfulness. I know everything you're going to tell me, and you probably will for this group. And you'll probably be like, I know every practice that he's doing. I've done a lot of trainings. I can conceptualize mindfulness within every possible different framework, modality framework. What can this person possibly teach me? And then there's other group that might be, and by the way, these groups might have overlap. Interestingly, we contain multitudes. I'm just not a mindful person. I think many of us, myself included, I admitted finally I teach a class on mindfulness at UVU for clinicians, and I admitted to some of my students, I don't actually practice mindfulness. Like at least in terms of a structured daily, what the practitioners recommend, sometimes you hear 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening. I don't have that practice. And I probably because of that, I am one of these people that needs to be immersed in the literature, and we're going to get into some of that in practices. We're going to get into some of that, and I'm someone who needs that. So that's just total full disclosure. Something I think about a lot. It's something I do when I'm in the workplace. I find myself doing a lot of mindfulness practices, but I don't do those kinds of structured practices. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. If you're like me and you're like, oh, okay, for the two groups, I hope that this can be something that wherever you're at on the spectrum of mindfulness understanding or adherence or practice, I hope that this can be a space not for you to learn. So if you think you're going to learn something, I hope you can let go and unburden yourself from that. I actually hope, and I know this is going to sound a little cheesy. I know I went all in on the theme of the slides. I know we're doing it all. I even thought about having a bell sound, which I really like. I didn't want to worry about the audio, but you can imagine that bell sound in your mind. But the purpose of this training is actually to kind of do the opposite. The purpose of the training is to unlock and to unburden and to unlearn in order to reinforce these principles into your practice or to begin your practice. I was curious about this. I asked my AI tool, Copilot at UVU to help out. And I said, how many articles have been published this year so far on mindfulness? This is the number. 10,430 articles this year alone. We're only in October that have been published across all disciplines. This is a movement that is taking over the social sciences. It is, I thought when I first started developing a course on mindfulness, I thought, okay, what are the basics? Where are we going? And then I started doing research. It's actually been really nice to develop this course at UVU. I've kind of been developing it as I've been teaching it. And I actually do this thing where I go, okay, I need to find an article on mindfulness and macro social work. There it is. I need to find an article on mindfulness and community development. There it is. So Google Scholar is a great resource. I need to find a critical analysis of mindfulness. But interesting one I found was called McMindfulness, a critical review of mindfulness practices. In that article, they highlight that a lot of people use mindfulness in almost a culturally appropriated way, extracting these principles from Buddhism and Hinduism, these practices, breathing, grounding, basically the ones we're going to talk about today. And they extract those in a way that might even be kind of culturally disrespectful, not fully embedding them within the moral and religious worldviews of Buddhism and Hinduism, and you might even say other, Christianity, contemplative practices, kind of the history of these things. And so please know that in a 2-hour training, I I trust we can all kind of go into the history of Buddhism and other sources of mindfulness, and I might source that a little bit. I'm going to talk about a couple of Buddhist thinkers, but I hope that we think about these as embedded, um, lent and borrowed practices, not extracted practices. My new friend Labo, I don't know how many people know Labo. She works with social workers teaching yoga in correctional facilities. And she presented in my class and she used the phrase the Lululemon of it all. And I really liked that. So for those of you who are like, okay, I don't really like the Lululemon, maybe even those of you who are like, oh, even this slide template aesthetic, like that's not me. I hope we can really simplify this. So, like I said, this is taken over, and yet, Buddhist teachers like the Dalai Lama, Thich Nhat Hanh, and others, who seem to be the people that I think are really pushing forward a kind of a global movement. Thich Nhat Hanh recently passed away. Have emphasized the simplicity, beauty, approachability, and universality of these practices. And so that's the spirit that I'm taking this training with. Thich Nhat Hanh, as I mentioned, recently passed away. He was a contemporary of Martin Luther King Jr. and was a civil rights leader who also, Vietnamese civil rights leader, who also kind of moved more and more toward the peace inside. My favorite book of his is called Peace in Every Step. And in that, he coins this term everyday mindfulness. And then I was thinking about this and I was like, what is everyday mindfulness? And maybe this is helpful for all of us. So for those advanced practitioners, a nice challenge for you, bringing that into your everyday. For those of us who are like, but I can't do it at all, I don't have the time, same invitation. Bringing this into your everyday. Let's take this middle one here, washing dishes. I work sometimes as a couples therapist. I moonlight as a couples therapist. Not a great job. and in that job, a lot of times I talk about the literal and the proverbial argument of who washes more dishes. This is a common thing that couples talk about. Thich Nhat Hanh brings up when we're washing dishes, he said you might feel this resistance leading up to washing dishes, and that's where the pain is. But the actual act of washing the dishes is actually quite enjoyable. He says, but sometimes he must follow a structure of eating dinner, washing dishes, and eating dessert. He says, sometimes if I'm thinking about the dessert as I'm washing the dishes, I don't enjoy washing the dishes, and then I don't fully enjoy the dessert. If I am fully present as I wash the dishes, enjoying that or being present, doesn't even have to be good, but just being present in that. Then when I move on to the dessert or whatever activity happens later, I can also be fully present in that space. Something I picked up very early on from Stuart Harper. I think many of you in this community know Stuart Harper, probably one of my earliest mentors. Love the wisdom of this man. He drew up 3 columns. I don't have this on a slide, so kind of pictured. He did past, present. I'll do it this way for you all: past, present, future. And he said, we can psychologically, I mean, this sounds really almost offensively simple, but when you think about it with the parts of you that are burdened with anxiety and depression, it's actually really helpful. Psychologically, we can live in kind of all 3. We really can psychologically live in the past. We can psychologically watch a movie and we can psychologically kind of empathically kind of enter into the world of the characters. We can psychologically live in the future. And this is offensively simple and reductive. This is not how I fully think about anxiety and depression, but you might think about anxiety or depression kind of generally residing in past psychological living, and anxiety kind of generally residing in future psychological projecting. But in our bodies, we can only live in the present. So the core of mindfulness practice, as you can see in all of these characters, and I know, you know, I put the confronting last one there in the corner of scrolling, if you can see that on the slide. But notice all of these, as we are connected to our actual bodies, that's what takes us out of the rumination, of the monkey mind chatter. And so it will be connection to self, connection to sensation. So all of the practices, and this will be something for those of you who are like, okay, I don't want these structured practices, but I want to be mindful in my approach within the modality that I use. How can you come on with some kind of embodied practice? So the first thing you might think about, and I talk about with the clinicians that I train, is how are you holding your body? How is your space structured? And many of them don't get to control their internship spaces, but how is your space structured? Where do you sit? Where does the client sit? How close do you sit to them? How much space? Like literal space, literal connection to body. And whenever we get lost in that, we'll connect to that. So this is the spirit that I like to think about our training in, and everydayness about it. We will get into some more specific focus practices, but we're also going to embrace, for those of you who are like, I don't know that I want to do deep mindfulness practices with my clients. It's like, okay, but you can still be, mindful in the practice you do. All right, so invite everyone to look at this list here. Got thinking about how these things are or are not mindful for you. I was talking to my brother and sister-in-law in the metro, a very busy place, and I was like, can this experience be mindful? And then we were like, what things can't be mindful? Can we make them mindful? We talked about, okay, well, let's say you're on the great culprit, right? You're on Facebook, you're on Instagram, TikTok, as the kids do, and you're scrolling. Can you be mindful while you're doing that? Rather than just shaming, like, don't get online, as it, even though we all do, right? It's like, actually, can you be mindful and aware, present, having the observing thinking above the practice that you're doing, saying, I'm doing this to get some stimulation briefly. I'm seeing the algorithm. I'm seeing everything that's happening. And probably that might be the fastest way to get off of scrolling, is not by saying I have to get off of this, but actually just accepting the practice. All right.
Doug, we
Yes.
have a question in our Q&A.
Love it. Yes.
So Stacy's asking, you talked about the body only being in the present. How do you approach trauma that is trapped in the body that makes your present also the past?
Wonderful. It makes me think of, body keeps the score and how yeah. I would be curious how many of the wonderful clinicians might think about this. Let me just give a kind of a brief response on this. I would say a saying from trauma-based approaches, like the past is present, but now we're dealing with the present past, not to get too, right? So yes, it is something that is trapped. The past, in a sense, is trapped in the past, but it's presenting itself in the present. So I'm still tuning to it as it's presenting in the present. So we might, with EMDR and ART and other practices, we might go back into a processing what happened, but it's actually what's actually currently happening. So totally, I would say totally accurate statement of, like, we kind of can carry the past. That's really good clarification. We kind of carry the past in our bodies, but then we're carrying them in the present. So we're tuning to them in the present. It's the way I think about it, but I'd be curious what everyone else thinks about that. That's an interesting question. Any other questions that have shown up? I'm actually not looking at the chat just so I can kind of stay focused here.
You're good. I'm watching for you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right, well, we spent a long time talking about dishes. Let's move on here. So for those of us who want a quick and dirty definition, this is the best, or the one, I would say not the best, but the one that I've kind of resonated with is from Jon Kabat-Zinn, who was probably credited to being one of the first people to really bridge Buddhist practice to Western audiences. And mindfulness is So mindfulness is awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment. So I'll give everyone just a second to kind of sit with that. Mindfulness is awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment. Oh, I left out that last one. Non-judgmentally. With our language, we don't have the language to really translate some of these terms. So we use a lot of non-judgmentally, non-doing, non-being for terms that we don't have in a lot of our Western languages. But you might think about non-judgmentally as its own thing. It's not just a not doing, it's a being present. I've started shifting a little bit more to the word neutrally. That's a word that's being used in a lot of different clinical practices, body neutrality. So, like arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. So that'll be a definition that we anchor to throughout our practice here. All right, so here's our roadmap for our discussion. Now that we've kind of framed that. Let me actually, there's something I thought about earlier. Let me go back here before we do this. I wanted to actually start with a little pre-practice. So I've got about 3, I might do 4 if we have time practices. I want to do a little pre-practice here with you all. Consulted with some colleagues, told them about this. They're like, well, Doug, if I went to a mindfulness training at 10 a.m. and I didn't actually do mindfulness, I would be pretty upset. So we're going to do quite a few practices. I'll talk about this more in depth about how to set up practices here in a second. But in the spirit of that, I just want everyone to know, nothing with force, nothing with coercion. So there are some of you who are like, I really am not in a place to be guided in a practice today. And that is totally, totally acceptable. I think probably a number of you are already differentiated enough that you'd be like, whether it's acceptable or not, bro, I'm doing it. I'm going to do what I want, right? And I not that you need permission from me, but I fully, completely honor that. I would say, however, with that, as I say to some of my clients, some of the best, if you really want to learn a modality, I think that probably some people resonate with this. Go to a therapist who does that modality and experience it as a clinician. And that's probably how you're going to experience that modality most authentically and really understand it. And so in the spirit of that, if you feel some a sense of resistance to doing any practices here, I might say, check in, forgive the IFS language here, check in with the part of you that might be a little bit resistant to that. And check in with, and I don't mean this in a kind of a gaslighting sense that if you don't want to do this practice, there must be something. No, I don't mean that. Check in from self, check in from, or from a deeper sense of like holistically might be the way of saying, is this the best practice? Is this the best practice for me to do? And just so you all know, the practices that we'll do in these 2 hours will be quite light. We're not going to go into anything that would be, in fact, you might even, if you're like me, you might even roll your eyes a little bit. You might be like, this is like definitely 101. Like we'll do the 5 senses practice, right? You're like, we learned this 10 years ago, right? But I wanted to make sure we have stuff that kind of covers the ground for all different clinicians here. So we won't go, please know, we're not going to go super deep, but still I say that just in the spirit of invitation. Some of you might be like, I would like to do the practice, but I also want to see a clinician kind of guide someone through that practice. So I'm going to stay a little bit outside of the deeper practice, and I just want to kind of observe a clinician do that. My guiding of practices in mindfulness is kind of just I just kind of developed over time, watching and reading a number of different mindfulness practitioners, but then finding what resonates with me. And so let's jump in with just a quick practice. This practice here, just so you all have informed consent, and that's something I'm going to talk about as we guide clients through practices, that they have informed consent. This is just going to be a very brief kind of mantra focused practice, and we're going to talk about shifting from a should mentality into an invitation mentality, and it'll just be a few minutes, just to kind of, and I do it as a clearing exercise. And I do it to frank and disclosing. I do it for myself as much as for you. I feel like these first 20 minutes, I've just been anxiously running through slides, and I have got to connect here. So, and this is something that I'll actually do with clients. I just saw Schwartz. I don't know how many of you were at the Schwartz training. I just saw Schwartz in Salt Lake a few weeks ago, and I saw him do this. He does this in front of a group of hundreds of people. And I thought that was really, really interesting. So you'll notice, and I promise I'm not trying to force my vocal change to change. As I get more centered, you'll notice me shift. There it is. That's the diaphragmatic breath. I'll do a diaphragmatic breathing practice here in a bit, so we'll unpack all of that. But just right now, I'll kind of show more here, just expanding, bringing the breath deeper. We'll do a deeper practice with that. And just a quick guide for all of us here. Our language, invite you to just whatever practice you like to do, if this feels good for you today. If this feels invited for you today. I might even take, for those of us who are really kind of, as I do, by the way, very multitasking and this sort of thing, really got to, these are the moments when I get my most emails sent is during these online trainings. I'll be real with you, right? For those of you who you're looking at that to-do list, you're thinking you're at the beginning of your Wednesday morning, whether you have colleagues that you need to have conversations with, whether you have emails, you might just even check in at the beginning of this training, everything that you need to do. Maybe it's not a to-do list, but there's something that's sitting with you, sitting inside of you. Whatever practice is helpful for you to be aware of that, noticing that. And a couple of words here, and this is not to trigger, but just to notice any have tos in your mind. I have to. For me, I have to engage you. I have to entertain you. I have to impress you. What are the have tos that you have? What are the have tos? Notice one, maybe two. Have tos. I have to be a good uncle today. I have to drink enough water. What are your have tos? And now notice, what are your haves? What are your haves? I have X number of clients. I have these responsibilities. I have this role at work. I have these collegial or personal romantic relationships. I have these children or this child. None of this is to get rid of your haves or have tos, but bringing in one at a time, being present with the haves and the have tos. And you might even notice with this training, do you feel that even with this training? I have to engage. I have to show that I care. I have to, just noticing that. Noticing even as we notice it, how the language shifts from a coercive and a possessive. Coercive and a possessive. Coercive, I have to, as if I'm coerced. And the possessive, I have, as in I own. Very Western concepts. You might just picture some of those softly fade. This is not to move beyond action. We're staying present, we're staying aware, but we're just letting them fade gently. and a new language emerges. I am able to. I am with. I don't possess. I don't control, and I'm not controlled. I'm with my clients. I don't have them. I am able to do my work. I don't have to. An opportunity, connection, as the have and the have to dissipates. I can see that for some of us who went pretty deep in this practice, some are just noticing, some are taking advantage, working on some other stuff. All of that is accepted here for me. For those going deep, we're going to come out of this here. We'll do a few more practices so you can touch this deeper place you went to today if you would like to. All of this with invitation. Nothing with coercion. You might check in with body. Any parts that are tense. I was holding a lot there in my forehead and my eyes as I'm explaining. Might even get a little bit quieter for those of you who might turn up the volume. We can get really quiet in some clinical settings. All right, we're here, moving beyond the haves and the have-tos. For those of you who went a little bit deeper, for those who may have even fallen asleep, that's really welcome. It's not a bad thing. And we're present here with invitation. Really, really honor that you would join a strange person with this practice. I mean, I can't see most of you, and you're here. I just really honor that you're here connecting with us. All right. Shifting here, coming back into this practice, a little bit, we're staying mindful. And for those of you who want to even be in a more meditative space, making sure that that's in line with your practice. Might even stay in a space. You don't need to be a student in terms of taking notes here. You'll have a recording of this and we'll share these slides with you. So follow the practice as it's helpful for you. So just a quick roadmap. This is what we'll talk about for the rest of the time here. So first, we'll be looking at safety. I thought that's probably number one. How do we establish safety? Notice my language here. Safety for you first as a clinician and the other person. Then moving into grounding. And these are somewhat sequential, although they don't have to be. But safety, I had safety as number 3, and I thought that really should be number 1. Before we do breathing or grounding, we really would probably want to talk about safety. Grounding, simplified grounding practices for any session. Breathing, the core of coping is breathing differently. Presence, being in presence with, while not being overtaken by, and reducing and treating our burnout as clinicians with that. Differentiation, holding space with differentiated care, and then integration, bring it all together in peace and empowerment, and talk a little bit about how mindfulness practices apply across several different modalities and modality areas. Before we jump in, any questions, or might even ask anything anyone else wants to cover? I don't know that I'll necessarily have wisdom on those areas, but Kelly, are we seeing any questions there?
I don't have anything in the Q&A, but if you guys have
Okay.
questions, let me know. Just type it in that Q&A box.
All right. And you can type it in at any time, and then we'll take some breaks throughout to ask for questions and to go there. And okay. Well, let's jump right in. So safety, establishing safety for you and the other person. I am sure I really like alliteration, so forgive me if I'm leaving out something that didn't have an A word here. I was thinking about what brings about safety. Now, this is not complete. Okay, so this is just some principles to think about in addition to everything you've learned in your ethics trainings, your ethics CE. So I'm not offering that here with this. But you'll notice that I'm already trying to do a number of these things. First one, authenticity. Actually being who you present yourself to. A client is the ultimate safety. Now, that's according to you or being a safe person, I should say. But a lot of times we want to present ourselves as very accepting. We want to present ourselves having that congruence of self. Like how often there's a trauma that we experience from someone actually not being who they presented themselves as. And so when we come in and we use language like I accept you or I'm here or, like really checking in and really making sure that that work is internal within ourselves. Acceptance, right? Social work 101 here, therapy 101, meeting a client wherever they are at and providing non-judgment. Of course, we can use Carl Rogers' language here of unconditional positive regard. But even that is a judgment in a way, right? Not, I mean, I'm very very client-centered as a clinician, but that can be a little bit judgmental if you think about it. It's positive regard. It's positively judging, but it's judging. So actually moving towards this neutrality more and more and more space for this. Was listening to a clinician say, when we need our client to heal. Notice that language. When I need for my own ego or for my own sense of being good enough as a clinician, I need my client to heal rather than accepting them in whatever timeline, whatever self-determination they are bringing forward. When I need them to heal, I am reifying the original trauma of not receiving full acceptance and attachment in one's authenticity. But when I can say to a client, I fully accept you in however much time you might take to heal. And while I might do a loving kindness meditation and hope for you to heal, I might hope for you to change and to grow and develop. I don't come in with that need for me. Is this Carl Rogers quote I read recently. The great irony is when I am accepted fully and completely as I am, then can I change? Now, again, for many of us, this is therapy 101. You're like, bro, I learned this so many years ago. But if you're like me, like if you get lost in this training and you're like, okay, how's this relevant? Or you get lost in this training in the sense of like, this is a lot. One thing that will help anchor us is go back into a client you might be thinking about. A client that might be hanging on you in some way and say, in what way am I offering authenticity and attachment and acceptance to that client? Notice this last one here with the policeman icon, inviting a client to disobey or rebel. So I'll use that language. I think I may have even used that language in the training, feel free to rebel or disobey against anything. You are not the authority. You're not the authority, taking out that role of authority over a client. And I've found as I like genuinely try to work on these principles and many of the other principles and ethics that we have in our clinic policies and in our licensure agreements and in our ethics trainings, right? All of those, right? Of course, as I follow these, and I really try to do it genuinely. It really, in a way, it's so interesting. It actually gives me more maneuverability. It gives me more ability. Clients will do things that might feel weird, like breathing, right, with their therapist, like doing a grounding exercise, and it really opens up for it's just like when you're ready. And I know different modalities spend a lot of time setting up safety and the therapeutic relationship before we even get to where we're doing any kind of mindfulness practice. I was talking actually to my therapist recently, and I go to a therapist who's an IFS practitioner. So I'll talk a little bit about IFS. That's something that's become really important for me. And she kind of mentioned, yeah, Doug, we needed to spend several sessions. This will relate. She specializes in working with therapists. She's like, I have to spend extra sessions building trust with therapists. And I was like, oh, makes sense. Totally makes sense. And she's like, we had to spend several sessions before we even kind of began a certain type of deeper practice with you. Now, Richard Schwartz might not describe his work as mindfulness exactly, but I'm gonna maybe try to convince us that Schwartz is even offering mindfulness in some way. Okay, so principles of safety. This actually might be a time I might jump ahead here to something that maybe might be of interest to some of us. Actually, our very last slide here. So we'll just jump ahead. This was something that I was thinking about. And I'm kind of curious, a little kind of quick reflection. You might look at this list real quick. Then we'll go back to those 6 areas we're covering. This is certainly not in any way a complete list, and it's definitely not something that you would say, these are just some ideas that I have here, but I'm curious what you think. The first one, I always try to give Freud his due. It's easy to talk about Freud with psychodynamic. I know very few of us really do any kind of psychodynamic, but I was thinking in a way, Freud with his free association, it was slow, uninterrupted, and arguably mindful. In some ways more mindful than some of our more focused CBT. The client really, really had space. With DBT, many people here know the what skills and the how skills kind of through mindfulness practice form an essential part of DBT. With acceptance commitment therapy ACT, use cognitive diffusion practices as a way to learn I am not my thoughts. I don't know if anyone's done that. How many people have done any of the like DBT or ACT practices with clients, but to really diffuse. So that idea of almost separating. I'll say sometimes to clients, we have a need to separate inside self. Dan Siegel calls this the right balance between differentiation and integration. And one way to think about dissociation is when we don't have intentional ways of separating within self while staying connected to aspects of self, then we dissociate. So actually giving clients a way across different modalities to get a little bit of space within self from either whether we think about it as a part or thoughts or somatic experiences, we give some space of separation and reflection, not disconnection or dissociation, separation and reflection. And so within that, we can then say, okay, I am experiencing this thought, but I am not my thoughts. Trauma-focused modalities, which probably many people here know, are trained in much more than me, but from my understanding, you do real gradual exposure and creating a safe environment before you go anywhere into kind of deep practice. Here's one I've been chewing on with my students, solution focus. We always teach solution focus. Not super in vogue right now, although many of us use stuff from solution focus still. I was thinking about the miracle question as a mindfulness practice. If you think about the way, let's see if I have it here. A student shared this handout with me. You might kind of, let's see. Give me a second to grab this sheet. Wasn't planning to do this. Oh, yeah. So the miracle question, as an exercise, this is what it says, recommended. Sit or lie down somewhere quiet where you won't be disturbed and carry out the miracle exercise. Allow your breathing to slow, settle comfortably, and let your mind wander where it will. So even solution focus, we might not think about, this brief therapeutic practice as mindfulness. But that sounds like mindfulness to me. Then ask yourself after the miracle, what will I see that is different? What will I hear that is different? What will I be that is different? And what will I feel inside that is different from the way I feel now? A little bit of an expanded miracle question from what I've been doing, which is like, what would be different when you wake up? I'm just going to ask you really quickly. And notice how differently it would be if I were to do the miracle question with a client in this way. Imagine you go to bed tonight, and I'm just doing my practice, and we're here, and we're really staying close to the surface, and might not give space for the observing mind, the core self. But if I ground myself and I slow down, I calm my anxiety or my anxious parts, I nourish my anxious parts, and I say, and I won't go through the whole thing here, but I say, all right, allow your breathing to slow. Settle in comfortably. It gives space, and we can measure this now neurologically. It gives space for other parts of the brain to come in. And from a strengths-based modality like solution focus, we're really trying to access the solution, right, from the exception that exists within the client themselves. And so slowing that down that allows the client to maybe say something different because they're accessing something different. And they may not even know why. And moving forward here to IFS, I think about self-energy as a mindful practice. I also think about unburdening as a mindful practice. I've noticed Schwartz doesn't always describe it that way because I think he thinks that mindfulness isn't as active. It's just kind of observing. There is a mindfulness component into getting into self. Some of us do self in a very cognitively focused way. We just kind of orient or maybe map this. Others of us might go really deep in it. But I would kind of argue. So we're kind of seeing a way to conceptualize mindfulness cross modality. So as you're thinking about your work right now, and again, for those of us who might be getting kind of even lost in this or discouraged, or maybe not, maybe you're just centered. You might think about, okay, what's the client? What kind of modality am I using? Or am I using an integrative approach? And how can I slow down and be more centered? It'll be a theme that we work through. You'll even see me shift between explaining mode into practice mode, slowing down, being more centered. All right, let's jump back to where we were at in this. I might jump around a little bit just as I'm kind of intuitively being with you here. I'm going to go, we could probably shift to breathing here. Yes.
We do have some questions.
Wonderful. Let's go to some questions. That's great.
So the first one is, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Adam Grant made a post the other day about mindfulness versus hope. Do you think one negates the other, or are they both strengths or tools that can coexist? He cited a study which concluded that mindfulness predicted greater distress, whereas hope contributed to higher resilience. He said that in hard times, it's overwhelming to live only in the present. What brings strength is anticipating a bright future. So what are your thoughts about that?
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, let me sit with that for a second.
I know that's a lot.
I've been traveling, so I try to stay current on Adam Grant's stuff. I love his stuff. But I didn't see that. That's interesting, and that's confronting in some ways. I would say it's an interesting question for me of like, okay, what is actually happening within our mindfulness practice? So mindfulness can be something that might be, I would argue, might be misunderstood in the sense of like, okay, if I'm going inside and I'm just observing the internal world, that actually might give me a more focused way to ruminate, to just kind of like that thing I can't get rid of. Whereas hope, I like what he says there, hope kind of directs and brings you forward. There's a term that I heard recently, gentle intentionality. gentle and gently intending. And I liked that because I think I was so focused on neutrality. We're just being with, we're just being with, we're just being present. That gentle intentionality is like, but we're moving toward something. So maybe there's a way of bringing that together. I think about mindfulness in the broad sense of like mindfulness includes something like grounding. Mindfulness includes going from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic nervous system. Mindfulness includes these practices that strengthen the brain. Like we can look at, here's maybe what I would say if I were commenting on Adam's Instagram, might say, okay, let's look at the studies of how, in fact, I think he posted this, like monks' brains are actually have more folds. So like Buddhist monks actually have, in a sense, bigger brains because they have more folds in the brain. You don't want a smooth brain, you want a folded brain. And so I would say there might be a balance there. There is also maybe a sorrow in being present or more present with what is. It's not necessarily bringing us toward happiness isn't the goal. It's for, at least for Buddhist practice, reduction of suffering is the goal. So yeah, so I might, yeah, it's an interesting meditation. I would love to do lunch or coffee with the person who brought that up. I love thinking about that. That's a great question. I wish we had a setting where we can have a back and forth on that, but that's one response. I don't know.
Maybe Laura will get a hold of you and you guys.
Okay, yeah, good. Thank you, Laura.
And then we have another question, a simple question. It's just, how do you create safety?
Oh, let's do something on that. That's a great, let's have everybody or anyone who would like to. This might be a good kind of pausing. We're kind of we're about at halfway, not quite, but almost at halfway for those who's like, okay, been listening to this guy for a while. Let's give a little bit of a break on this and let's have everyone write down or type in a notes app or something. How do you create safety? What do you think? If we were to say, we have so much wisdom here with this group. How do you establish safety? I mean, I could say something on my slides or something else I'm thinking about, but I'll just give everyone a few minutes here just to kind of reflect. If you're being real, let's be genuine here. Well, ethics training, we do that at a different time. So all of that applies. But just like if you're being totally real, like this is the between session real talk that you're having with your colleague, right? Like what is safety actually for you? I'll pull up, I had some orienting thoughts here on this. These are three of many things. What is safety for you? Let's go ahead and write that down. And maybe we'll use the chat here to get some responses. Does everyone see the chat, Kelly, or everyone can see it? Okay.
They should, yeah.
Okay. So you don't have to do this, but let's just have whoever would like to, once you've written something down, maybe you wrote it down and it's really personal for you and don't want to share it. That's, let's really honor that. But
do you want me to read what they're putting?
Yeah, let's just read through some of the
Okay.
responses. Thank you.
We have got sincere compassion, moments to pause, create an environment with the client that they feel non-judged, allow for silence as well as emotion, building rapport first, being trustworthy, and then I let the client lead. I will ask often if there's anything they want to talk about or not talk about. I also try to really listen to my intuition. As a male therapist, he puts LOL, the distance I provide between me and most clients in session is at least 6 feet.
Yeah.
Also allow the client to determine the environment, like lighting or where they sit, etc. Listening. And then another, openness to clients theory. Sorry, I just got a bunch of emotions. Openness to clients theory of change. Authenticity, realistic predictability, having experiences normalized, invitation, partnership, calm, and connection. I find I have to genuinely care about the person I am talking with and be totally okay with them as they are. When I have this attitude and perspective, the words I use naturally create safety for the other person. I feel that this happens virtually every time within a few minutes of the first session. Observing animals and nature in real time, watch how things are at being real. Safety is in joining us working on the problem, not client as the problem, like that. Safety is in normalizing their experience. They are not broken, and safety is in warmth. And then the last one is doing what I say I'm going to do. Good
Wow.
stuff.
That is real. Wow. This is a good group. Some of those comments, I was like, I want to go to you. I want you to be my therapist. That's thank you all for sharing that. Wow. I think we might do this on more of these points. That was that comment of listen, listen, listen. I think I'm coming to, with 10 years of practice at this point, I think I just realized, if I'm being honest, how often I'm not listening. How often I'm like, this is the fourth client of the day. I'm about to have lunch. Do they really need me to listen to the content of whatever, and slowing that down and listening. The poet says there's underneath the person is the real person. Underneath the tree, another tree. Underneath the person, the only person to see. And so listening dually, listening both to the content and what the person's sharing, but also, all the things we do, this je ne sais quoi, this X factor of therapy of like, there's this sixth sense of like, what is really happening for them, slowing ourselves down, whatever practice we need to slow ourselves down to do that, or to build rapport, or giving clients the opportunity to sit wherever they would like, control the lighting. Yeah.
I do have one
Right.
more question, or do you?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's do, yeah, that'd be great.
This is kind of a follow-up that's kind of similar. Can you speak to using mindful practices with teens and or those with high anxiety? I've read that sometimes meditative practices, which have a lot of crossover with mindful practices, can actually increase anxiety.
Yeah, I've done this. I don't work a lot with teens myself, so this is just kind of shooting from the hip. Let me think about it. Let's do the same thing here. For those of you who work with teens, what have you found with grounding practices or breathing practices that have worked with teens? So those of you who work with teens, I've had some students share some interesting things in my mindfulness class that they do with teens recently. But I'm kind of curious, the wisdom we have with this group. What do you do with teens that works, that doesn't move into that place of increasing anxiety? That
Do
you
we
would say is,
maybe let people unmute and answer, just so they don't have to type it all in?
sure, yeah. If someone would like to
If you
share,
guys, if you guys want to just unmute and
raise your hand or jump in.
yeah. Raising your hand I might miss because we've got
Because
almost 250 people.
right.
Some people are saying music, use their music, but teaching them to be mindful with the nature. There's lots of small ones coming in. You can I wasn't gonna read them, but you're typing them in.
That's great.
Teaching them to be mindful in nature. I had a teen in a PTSD flashback that I would use grounding, so he would open his eyes and bring his mind and body to the current place and not in the past of trauma. Movement, walking, serene music, I can't talk. Music, art. I feel like it depends on the person. Mindfulness and meditation is a coping mechanism, and like all coping mechanisms, some work for some people and others don't. Yeah. Let's see what else is coming in. Okay, remember guys, if you're asking a question, put it in the Q&A, because not in the comments, or I'm going to get really confused.
We have a lot of
Yeah, because
comments
it
here.
says, do you touch the subject of caffeine use when you talk about mindfulness practices?
Hmm. I don't typically. I'm curious what. Yeah, that's an interesting.
Yeah, let's see. Somebody's saying, first make sure that they are okay with what we are doing. Start very slowly. I use music and guided imagery to start with, and then move to mindfulness and meditation. Showing them how their hobbies and interests can be natural coping resources, practicing skills together in session, and always emphasizing choice. If they don't like it, it's okay. We'll find something else they like better.
Yeah.
Do you want me to keep going, or do you want to move on?
Let's do a few more.
Safety, having choices, informed consent, having soothing environment with less distractions or interruptions. In anxiety, you need to reduce the heart rate. So breath work, that is an extended exhale. In depression, breath work is an extended inhale to just to increase the heart rate. I'm sorry. So depression, exhale, or I mean, inhale, and yeah, anxiety, exhale. Mindfulness may not create anxiety, but rather expose it. Progressive muscle relaxation techniques do work for many populations. Sometimes things come in and cover it up, and I can't read all of them.
And could work progressive muscle relaxation could really work with teens. I could see that being effective with teens.
Yeah, yeah. Lots of comments about acceptance and, instead of resistance is really important. And breathing, yeah.
Great. Love the participation, love those comments. And sounds like there are people, as I mentioned at the beginning, who've done quite a bit of mindfulness work. One thing that I'm thinking about just as we're sitting back, almost reflecting on this, like with the number of articles, right, that have been published with so much discussion on this, you might think about when we say mindfulness, do we think mindfulness is an intervention or a set of interventions versus mindfulness being almost maybe like trauma, like a lens through which I experience the world. And so part of what might go into as we kind of go into grounding. So a lot of times when we think about mindfulness, we might think, okay, we're going into deeper meditative work or something. But I've noticed I'm curious if other people do this. Share in the comments if you do. But I've just started doing this thing where I'll just, as a client just gets triggered, I'll just be like, I don't even ask them to like sit up differently, or I might ask them to do that, but I'll sometimes just like, let's say they're sitting back, they've got their legs crossed or something, I'll just be like, and just that one foot that's on the ground, just kind of press that down. And I'll do this across different modalities. And I just not even interrupt them, just as they're kind of going, like, yeah, just pressing that foot down. I'm listening, pressing that foot down, right? I'm kind of connected there. And I've just noticed that starts to kind of align. And it's such a simplified practice in that I'm not trying to shift out of anything else that they're doing. So I don't even say like, touch the couch or touch your jeans, I'll just be like, and just even notice whatever you're touching right now, just noticing that as if it's presenting itself to you. See, even as I did that, right? Shifting the breathing, and it brings me more present. So when we say mindfulness, we might think, oh, this is a deep meditative practice, or it's something that exists within one modality or something. And I'm actually an invitation to all of us to maybe at least for the next hour to go back to whatever we think afterwards, or think if there's something you're taking from this training, but expanding that into saying, okay, this is more of a lens. Because we can study the benefits of each of these individual things. Right? We can look at grounding as a part. We can look at breathing as something that brings all of these benefits. I loved the comment about breathing differently for anxiety versus depression. There's a wonderful YouTube video, a TED Talk you can look up on YouTube. I think it's called 3 Types of Breathing, or it's called water breathing, caffeine breathing, and whiskey breathing. And there's a caffeine breathing, sort of kind of quick inhale that brings energy, or And then there's the water breathing, which is what we might typically think about as diaphragmatic breathing, which brings kind of centeredness, so that we kind of get that regulatory effect when we drink water. And then whiskey breathing, which is like something to really slow down the system. And I've been thinking about this quite a lot. We'll come back to this here in a second. We'll shift to breathing. I've been thinking about this quite a lot with breathing. Breathing is to hear me out on this, breathing is like the core of coping, is breathing differently. We think about so much healthy or maladaptive coping that we do as human beings is, I mean, I'm sure that it shifts a lot of physiological things, right? Increases some brain chemicals, decreases other brain chemicals, changes the heart rate. But you might think about that, just try this on for a second. A lot of it is breathing. As people quit smoking, there's interesting research and studies on how they miss that slowing down and breathing in the inhale and exhale they got through smoking, because smoking almost became a mindfulness practice for them. And so you might think about breathing as so much of what we do, substances that change our breathing, activities and behaviors that shift our breathing. And so with that, you might start thinking about, okay, well, you know, relationships that when I can vent and connect, it actually helps me breathe. And so actually getting really direct on that, if this is the core or a core of coping, right? I'm sure there are a lot of things around coping. If this is a core around coping, we might say, well, how can we breathe differently? I just took a flight and they say, and breathe normally. You know, they always say that. Put the oxygen mask on and breathe normally. But embracing breathing differently. First, though, quote here from Thich Nhat Hanh, the first practice is totally neutral. Breathing in, and we'll do this practice here for those who want to do it. Just breathing in, however you're breathing in, no right or wrong way to breathe. I am breathing in. Breathing out, I am breathing out. Go ahead and spend a few breaths on that, breathing in. I am breathing in. Breathing out, I am breathing out. I started doing this practice with clients, and it really does bring a little bit of a neutrality. Sometimes we do breathing in the good, breathing out the bad, or breathing in something and then kind of releasing. And that's, you know, there are lots of practices. We breathe in and we observe the thought. We breathe out, kind of let the thought go, right? We probably, a lot of us know those practices. We can talk more about those. But I just like this real anchored, simple practice. For those of us who might be like, this is so simple. This is obnoxiously, offensively simple. It's like, yes, exactly. Exactly. That's actually the point is, right? I could have gotten more developed practices here. That's kind of the point, is that these things are really core and basic and simple. It's not in the understanding them. It's not in their intellectual robustness or their evidence base, like articles that have been written about them, that the power lies. It's actually in the simplicity and in the doing of them that we actually get the benefit. And so kind of sitting with that here for a second, I might just kind of breathing in, for those of you who just want to keep doing that, breathing in and breathing in, breathing out. I'm breathing out. There's nothing beyond that. Right now, it's just neutral, open, non-judgmental, present. Breathing in. I'm breathing in. Breathing out. I'm breathing out. Now we then may expand that breathing practice in a number of ways that many of you know. Might count the breathing, might do nostril shifting on inhale, exhale. We might combine that with a guided imagery. We might combine that with body work. And many of you are advanced in those practices. Some of you might decide now which practices, but just from a basic practice standpoint, just getting into that, breathing in, breathing out, I'm breathing out. Now, some of you are like, Doug, it's for me right now, it's more like breathing in, I'm breathing, breathing out, I'm breathing out. I don't want your diaphragmatic breathing shame, right? We often, there's no wrong way to breathe. It's just a thing we experience. And we have a lot, this is something my students are really helping me understand. There are a lot of different breathing techniques to do a lot of different things physiologically. But we're just basing it in this core. Question for the group here. And we just kind of get some comments. What are some benefits that you've found with breathing practices with your clients? What are some benefits that you've found? We'll give you some time. For those of you who want to just keep breathing, keep staying here, that's fine. For those of you who are like a little bit more active, engaged, want to participate, what are some benefits you've found with you incorporating breathing in some way? And if you'd like to share resources or books, or this is a space where we can all kind of collaborate together in the chat.
We've got some comments here. Assists with reducing anxiety and grounding. Letting go of the anxiety of too much future. Noticing actual change in their emotional field. Star breathing. Just jumped on me. Star breathing and candle breathing calms littles. I have found that too. The psychological sigh is 2 inhales, then exhale to help reset the parasympathetic nervous system.
Well, can you read that again? 2 inhales and 1 exhale?
Okay. Let me get that. Is 2 inhales, then exhale to help. Yeah.
Oh,
2 inhales.
yeah.
And exhale.
Okay. Yeah. And that's to reset the parasympathetic nervous system.
Somebody's recommending a book, Breath, by, oh, yes, I know of that one. By, it's covered up. James, why is this? Move. Nestor. Yeah, that's what I'm seeing so far.
Thank you so much. Wow, we should just do this all the time. I guess you are doing this all the time. It's such a great community of sharing these resources. You don't have to wait for these moments in the chat. You can, I don't have the chat up, so it doesn't distract me. So feel free to keep sharing resources and thoughts on any of this, and that would be a benefit to your colleague. I'm here giving a very basic overview and really trying to just create, as I mentioned at the beginning, create a space to kind of unlearn, reconnect, and also offer some basics for the whole group. But I really love the cross connection there. So I'll probably ask some more questions about this. For those who want it or need it, here's some steps for diaphragmatic breathing. If you need to, I didn't want to work with audio with the Zoom presentation today, but you can Google any YouTube, search for YouTube diaphragmatic breathing. Many of you already know about these practices, so forgive the restate here. So we'll go through this fairly quickly. Getting comfortable, so sitting or lying down with relaxed shoulders. I learned this thing. I took ballroom in high school, and someone said, "Doug, I want you to picture." I wasn't good at it. It's funny to watch those old videos. So, Doug, I want you to picture these ropes pulling your shoulders up to the sky and then relaxing them down. And that was I think about that a lot. That with mindfulness practice, we want kind of a focused posture, but a relaxed posture. And that can be kind of a balance for some clients, because focused is like anxiety, right? But relaxed is like in that depression state. And actually we want to bring them together. So it's kind of focused and relaxed. I'll bring this down here. Gotta see, I turned myself off, so I gotta see myself. Okay. We'll go ahead and do this together. If you want to do this, that's fine. If you already know this, you're like snooze fast. That's great. But for some of us, you might look at, is there something new here? So one hand, and we'll all kind of do this together for those of us doing the practice. One hand on the chest, other on the abdomen. I used to skip this step. I just noticed for someone just learning this, it really does help to just feel the hands raised. Those who do this work with children, I know you'll kind of have them lay down, put like a toy or something on their stomach, and they watch it raise. It's kind of a fun way of doing it. So I'm already doing it even as I'm talking. I don't know why I can't talk about this and not do it. Breathing in through the nose, letting the abdomen rise. Notice your abdomen moving more than your chest. Move this. Step 5. Exhale, breathing out through your mouth. I would say you can also breathe out through your nose on this. Letting your abdomen fall. Continue the slow, deep breathing pattern. On this number 7, keeping your breathing steady and even. One image that I use for myself, sometimes works for clients, is I picture swimming. So the inhale is going to one side of the pool, and then I turn around. You don't want to hit it hard. You actually want to turn around in the water. So I talk about this slow handoff between the inhale and the exhale. It's really hard to explain. It's like you're still kind of inhaling. This is going to be, some of us might need to do a quick chest breath to get some air as we're practicing. That's totally fine. Just as we're doing this, just kind of a slow inhale. We slowly transition into the exhale. So it's like a handoff. Do you feel that smooth transition? It takes a while to get that transition. It's like turning around in the water rather than hitting the wall. This is how we breathe when we sleep, not the whole time, but parts of our sleep. It's just really one, just kind of slowly shifts. It's the inhale. Inhale, and then we still just feel that shift. There, shifting. Really softening the corners there. Just feel that. Inhale comes back in, we're shifting. I'll say this was a practice that I did. Those of you who'd like to keep doing that practice. This was a practice that I would like to, that I did regularly for some time. I really anchored myself in this idea of habit forming. You got to do something for 30 days to make it automatic, make it a habit. And I really have experienced that I found that now with nervousness and anxiety, I don't know if anyone else has experienced that, I automatically go to diaphragmatic breathing. So a client comes in with something that might typically trigger me or something that might activate me in some way, and my response is almost an immediate diaphragmatic breath and bringing that in. And I'll joke with other clinicians, something we might call the sneaky breath, right? It's like you do that diaphragmatic breathing very quietly so they don't know that you're, it's just kind of like there, help center us. It's the water breathing. Any reflections or thoughts from that practice or of diaphragmatic breathing in general? Go ahead and get some more participation here. Anyone found benefits with doing diaphragmatic? Maybe some challenges with teaching it? I found some clients just do not resonate with it, and or they take a really long time.
Somebody's saying you can always ask them to join you in your breath exercises.
Yeah, yeah.
Not getting any more comments yet. I do have some questions if you want to go there.
Yeah. Let's shift there. That's great.
This one kind of is kind of what we were talking about before, but it says, I have used mindfulness practices a couple of times where that person said it made me feel worse. Why is that? One client had autism and the other client had major trauma. Any advice on how to respond from that? And should I try again or not try again with mindfulness practices with them? And why do people often say they feel super, super unsafe with mindfulness?
Yeah. I think, yeah, great questions there. I
I have
think that, yeah,
I was gonna
please.
say, I could share an
Yeah,
experience
yeah.
that I had with a client. We were, you know, we were doing breathing and things like that, just for calming and she said, this is making me feel worse, making me feel worse. And I just stopped and we discussed, what that was all about. And come to find out, her abuser, she'd been sexually abused, and her abuser, that's what he used. He told her, like when she was, in pain or fighting, he would say, just breathe, just breathe.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes it's just maybe finding out a little bit more about what they've been through. It might be triggering at first because of their experience itself. At least that one was for me. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a few clients with body dysmorphia, and the breathing practices, they're like, this is the most triggering thing ever. They know me well enough that they know I never do breathing practices with them in session, of course, because of that. But they know that I'll still kind of be like, yeah, you get some benefit from doing some breathing at home. Like I'll still cite the research. I think there's a balance there that I think yes, informed consent, and yes, of course, we're letting the client. I loved all the comments on safety. We're letting the client lead. We're not going anywhere the client is not wanting or choosing, might be a better word, choosing to go. Um, but also informing them of the benefits and letting them know. And so I'll have some clients who'll say, no, I don't want to do it in session, but I really did go and practice that, and it really did help me. I've had clients say, I really got that diaphragmatic breathing going down, and I don't want to come back to therapy. That's all I needed. And I'm like, great. I did 2 sessions.
I'm healed.
Yeah, I'm healed. And I'm like, you may or may not be back, but if you got that much benefit from it, and then everything on that extreme. But what was the
reframe ways that
sorry.
sorry, please go ahead.
No, I think it was somebody that just accidentally.
Just kind of accidentally unmuted. Okay. I was like, oh, we got a comment. I would that neurodiversity piece is interesting too. I think with a fair amount of my clients on the spectrum, I've noticed part of it is just language. When people hear mindfulness, they think meditation a lot of times. So they think I'm going to go somewhere deep, and that's going to feel really uncomfortable. I might trigger this trauma. So sometimes I won't. This is a helpful thing. I won't even use the word mindfulness. I don't need to use the word mindfulness. I'll just use the word let's just do some grounding, just press your feet down. I mean, it's this quick. I know that I'm doing a lot slower stuff with you all, but I might just be like, just press your feet down, kind of feel the ground, just kind of feel like I'm talking this quickly. And sometimes I'll not even, if I give space, that's going to trigger. I actually keep the mindfulness actually here at this level. So I'm kind of staying here. Yeah, we're just pressing the feet down, just noticing we're staying here. Okay, what is it? We're doing really active work, just staying right here. So you kind of notice this. So I'm keeping you in this sense of safety, what you've asked for, what I sense with my clinical practice is right for you today. We're not going deep into that, but you're just wanting to kind of chat on this level, but we're still bringing in connection with body, but we don't have to connect with body in the slow sort of way. Right. And so that has kind of helped me to be like, we can actually do mindfulness right here like this. And it might be very active. It might be like walking. I just got a book in Montreal. I'll show you all here. I've loved it so far. It's a meditative book on walking called Walking from a Norwegian author. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but Walking One Step at a Time. Let's try Erling Cog. Maybe you IKEA shoppers can help with that. But maybe the very active mindfulness practice is doing a walking session with a client. And we're not going deep, we're not going intrapsychic, we're not triggering anything, but we're giving some movement, connection to bridging the mind-body dualism in order to then, and also, as we know, the bilateral stimulation, which then allows us to kind of keep moving forward. So yeah, mindfulness doesn't have to be even something we use the word for, or something that's slow and,
They don't even need
but then we might slow down just enough to give emotional space, right? So there's a balance there. There's a tug and a pull there. I don't know if that's helpful. That's a thought. What do you other thoughts, questions? I love what you shared.
we've got some questions coming in. Any tips on using these techniques with children in a group setting? I find they feel it is a little silly and have a hard time focusing or allowing others who want to focus.
Did I hear children in a group setting?
In group settings, yeah,
Children
that
in
they
group setting.
feel silly around the others, and some are kind of a little disruptive with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I would actually invite leaning into the silliness. If you want to have a good time, watch a bunch of Dalai Lama videos and how silly he becomes. He sticks his tongue out at like people in the audience when they look at him. Like he's very playful. And I mean, right? Like, and so I would say, yeah, let's do a silly thing. I mean, I don't know. I'm thinking about the years ago that I did play therapy. It's like, this is gonna be fun, this is gonna be silly. Right? It doesn't have to be still and quiet, especially for children. Maybe make it a competition. You could use play in some way. I'm curious about that. But what do other people think? Those of you who are actually currently working with children, does anyone do mindfulness in a group setting with children here that might speak to that? That's a very specific sort of thing, but
Yeah.
definitely
I
needed.
know we do it here with our groups, we have kids all the way from 3 to 17. And so the different therapists of those different groups will do that. And I know somebody's saying that they agree to step into that silliness and let that be mindful about, about that. And yeah, they're kids.
Yeah, yeah.
I work with children, and hey Doug, and I've started doing a little bit. I haven't done a lot, but I want to do more of it. Do some grounding, mindfulness stuff with the kids. So I've started to do it, and so far it seems like it's going okay. With kids who are anxious and nervous and things like that.
Tell me your name.
Daryl Haslam.
Oh yeah, you can't see. This is
I
Daryl.
can see him. No, I can see it. He popped up there. So, and
Yeah.
what do you find that's helpful?
Well, I think it's just for them to kind of be mindful and kind of do a little relaxation, breathing. So kind of deep breathing, release, grounding, kind of stuff to just kind of be in touch with their body and be able to release and relax a little bit before they leave the session.
Yeah.
They used to play therapy, so I let them get out what they're going to get out from the play therapy, but do a little grounding. I've done it before, not every time, but do a little grounding moment, with the kids at times before they leave.
Oh, wow. So it's kind of like at the end of a play therapy session,
Yeah.
just a quick grounding piece. Love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. My colleague, Bethany Anderson, some of you might know Bethany, she practices in Salt Lake area. She has like these swing that the kids sit in. There's like a sensory swing. Have you seen this? It's almost like a cocoon sort of thing, and they kind of sit in it. She has a separate room, and she'll sometimes actually go in there after a session, just for the kids who really need that sensory piece. So they'll go and kind of sit in that swing, and she does that at the end of sessions.
I want to get in that swing.
I know. I sat in it, and I was like, I need this. I want this.
Yeah.
Well, great. And if you have other thoughts on that, add them to the comments. Thanks so much for sharing that. Okay.
We have a couple more questions. But I don't want to
Let's do
interrupt
it.
what
These
you're
are
trying to.
valuable.
Yeah.
These are great.
Actually, this is from Daryl, who was just talking to us, but he wants
Okay,
to know, how does Wim Hof breathing technique fit with this discussion of mindfulness and being present? I don't know what that is. But
I've heard of that, but remind me of that if you want to jump back on.
Yeah. Hey, Doug. So that is where you can do that hyperoxygenating your brain. You got the double breath, and then exhale, double breath. And you do that for several minutes, prolonged state. And what it does when you hyperoxygenate your brain for 10 or 15 minutes is it really amplifies your body mind awareness, and you feel tinglings in your body and different things. We're going to do one in our clinic here next week in Provo, and they find a guy who does it. But it's really interesting stuff. I've been to a couple of those sessions, but it really just amplifies that whole mind body connection and awareness.
Okay, by oxygenating, is that?
Yeah, And that, you know, big breathing. I'm at a doctor's office, so I might have to drop off for a second. The doctor comes in, but
Oh, okay.
yeah, that's the basic thing is that, you know, that double breath, you kind of get that hyper oxygenating kind of effect, and then you kind of go through it, and then there's some visualization that goes with it too.
Oh, cool. Cool. Well, I'm excited to learn more about that. I'm excited. You said you might have to pop off. You can't teach this to us real quick.
Yeah, I don't now get my. I'm just waiting for the doctor to pop in, but
Okay.
yeah, so
Okay.
We'll
Well,
have,
we'll
let's
we'll all
chat later. I'd be
connect.
happy to
Learn
chat
more.
with you later.
Yeah, yeah, I would love that. Maybe share it to the resource to the community here. That's really cool.
Yeah.
yeah, we'll have Daryl on.
Okay, yeah,
That's
yeah.
scheduled for December, I think, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, there we
Just
go.
throw that
Good.
into your
This is the
training.
preview. This is the preview. Cool. Cool. That's great.
Okay, just one more.
So I have a comment I'd like to make if I could.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I want to speak to dissociation and the feeling of unsafety. So a lot of our clients are so used to dissociating because of trauma. They're used to checking out of their body. I heard a statistic that 98% of women who use substance abuse have been sexually abused. They don't want to feel. It's not fun to feel. And so when you're inviting someone into mindfulness, you're inviting them into their body to be present and to feel. And that's a very scary thing. And so that's totally where the informed consent comes in, and they have to know that I am going to feel, and this is why I'm going to feel, because if I don't feel, I can't heal and I can't protect myself in the future. I need to be aware of my situation. So
Thank you so much. Is it Mary or Mary Jean?
Mary Jean.
Mary Jean, can you speak if you don't mind, just because you seem to do a lot more work with these populations, what have you found has helped them to shift? Of course, the informed consent piece, but what have you found that's helped them to shift to where they might embrace, or if not embrace, at least use mindfulness approaches?
So one is psychoeducation, just about trauma and about why people dissociate and normalizing it, helping them recognize when they're doing it, why they're doing it, and why they might want to do something different. So it's helping them choose to go to a scary place because they know the benefits that are going to come from it. So, yeah. And yoga is a huge key for people who've had their body violated in some way. That has been perhaps one of the most healing modalities for some of my clients who've been sexually abused, because that's completely informed consent. I'm choosing to get in this body position that then invites more mindfulness to this part of my body or to what is happening, and it's definitely slowed down. So yeah, helping people choose to be present and know why it's worth feeling.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
The more I get into this research myself, the more I'm like, I have got to get back into doing yoga, because there's so many outcome studies for yoga practice. And that's one I hadn't thought about that, but I love what Mary Jean shared on that one of the benefits is that we have, not just through the practice overall, but every single movement is informed consent. And there are adjustments that I can make within my own practice. And it seems like there might be a little bit of removal from it, because it's also can be almost exercise or exercise adjacent. And so it's not going to necessarily send me, I don't know, do you think that's true, Mary Jean? It's not going to send me as deep into the remembering because of the active nature of the movements. I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking about that with yoga. Maybe something for us to think about there. That's
Doug, Rita would like to know if you've noticed mindfulness breathing exercises are more difficult for clients with ADHD.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Well, this is one that I can speak to personally, if some of you haven't already noticed that I have ADHD. One thing that I've learned for myself and that I really like doing with probably half of my clients are either have ADHD or are exploring that diagnosis, as many of our clients are. I work with a lot of young adults. college age clients, and I just make it very distraction friendly. So two thoughts on this. First one is just make it really distraction friendly. So you just go, yeah, if you interrupt this practice, if you have other thoughts that come in, that's okay. One practice I'll do is I'll be like, just kind of envision a thought bubble above your head and just all of the thoughts that come in, and you're gonna have random thoughts, you're gonna have distracted thoughts. And sometimes a client even then will be like, notice the picture, like behind, like, just look at the picture right here. And they start looking, I'm like, and I just try to, probably because I have ADHD, I just go straight there. I'm like, yeah, just like, you're noticing the picture. I just use the picture as part of the practice. And so I actually use the distraction in part of the practice, because if mindfulness is being aware in the present moment, I can do that with ADHD. I actually track the distractions and I'm present with the distractions. So I try to make it really distraction friendly. So that's one thing that I found. Another thing that I found recently that I saw a therapist do that was really nice is actually conceptualize distraction as a part that has a purpose. So distraction, which we want to be careful how we do that, because that could be shaming to an automatic neurological process for someone with ADHD, right? We want to be careful how we do that. But I've been thinking about that myself, that even with someone with ADHD, sometimes, not always, sometimes distractibility has a protective function for self. So there are clients who, when they're getting closer to a vulnerable place or getting triggered, the distractions fire a little bit more intensely. And so noticing that without any like shutting that down or anything, just being curious and open about that. That's interesting that when speaking for myself here, when I get into a more vulnerable state, that distractibility kind of goes more often. And so that is something that I think. Those are two thoughts I have. But again, let's ask the community. What are some things you found with that group with mindfulness plus ADHD? And you can jump on and comment, or you can type a comment. And no pressure, but I'm curious. What are some things that work? And it's okay if not. We just have so many people here. It's like so many good comments. So great.
Nothing's coming in yet, but if it does.
Okay, let us know. Any other questions there, Kelly?
No more questions. That was the last one.
All right. Well, let's kind of move forward here. You know what, we might come back to this big thing here. First, I want to talk a little bit about differentiation. This is something that Schwartz just said in a Q&A a few weeks ago. Richard Schwartz says something that I've thought about almost obsessively, and I finally just like did some basic research on this. This is going to be a little confronting to social workers, I think, or to clinicians. It was kind of confronting to me. For those of us who are Brene Brown disciples, might be a little bit confronting. I'm actually going to make, and hear me out here, I'm going to make an argument against empathy. Okay, now what I'm not saying is I'm saying let's embrace psychopathology. Okay, what I'm saying is maybe there's a different way. So Schwartz said this thing. He said the neurological circuitry for empathy is actually different and separate from the psychological or neurological circuitry for compassion. And I just wanted to look at this science here really briefly. So with empathic distress, and I am not a neuroscientist, so you can Google this and look this up. When we are empathically relating, and this is really connected and related to burnout, we are, and I'm going to move, there we go. We have three of many areas that are activated in the brain: the anterior insula, the anterior cingulate cortex, I don't even know if I'm saying that right, and the somatosensory cortex. When we are experiencing others' pain, the anterior insula is activated, and the ACC is activated when we're involved in emotional regulation and experiencing others' distress. And then we have this somatosensory cortex that helps us simulate or imagine others' physiological sensations. So there's an interesting new research actually linking empathy to increased dysregulation and increased like emotional pain. Compassion, on the other hand, when we experience, did I have, oh, here we go. Compassion, on the other hand, is VMPFC, I'm not even going to try to say that, is associated with positive emotions and pro-social behavior. The ventral striatum is linked to reward and positive feelings in the medial, help me out here, orbitofrontal cortex is involved in processing rewards and positive emotions. So the circuitry around compassion actually, you might say in shorthand, gives energy, whereas empathy takes energy. Okay, now let me stay with me here. For those of you who are like, I can't believe this guy is saying to not be empathic. When we experience empathy, particularly empathic distress, our brain regions associated with pain and negative emotions become more active. This is partly why we get so burnt out as clinicians. This can lead to feelings of overwhelm, burnout, and we essentially share in the suffering of others. Now, again, I know I'm being confrontive here. I do think there's something meaningful about that sharing. But compassion, on the other hand, activates brain regions associated with positive emotions and pro-social behavior, as the areas we talked about here. So compassion involves a higher order reappraisal or self-regulation component, allowing individuals to maintain emotional balance while still being motivated to help others. This helps prevent the emotional exhaustion that can come from empathic distress. Health benefits. Practicing compassion has been linked to numerous health benefits, including reduced stress, improved immune functioning, and increased overall well-being. This is because compassion fosters a sense of connection and positive engagement, as we talked about, rather than the draining effects of empathic distress. So why compassion over empathy? Empathy, we might think about it as actively feeling the real-time emotions of the client. Might get possibly triggered in session, increasing risk of disconnection or our own dissociation or burden. Compassion, on the other hand, genuine care while honoring the client's unique situation. And witnessing without taking on, like taking on the experience, taking on the emotions that come up in the session. So a couple of reminders. Empathy, we might also then, given that we're like imagining and feeling the emotions that are being present, we then might tend to over-identify or project onto. So you might think about, how do I hold space without taking your emotion? Now, a reminder on compassion, I still would argue, maybe this is the social work hard in me, I'm not saying we cast out empathy. I'm just suggesting that maybe we go a little bit deeper into compassion practices. So we're suffering with, but we're not suffering as. So I can hold your burden with you, but I'm not holding your burden as you. Because we have this incredible ability as human beings to like really, as we talked about the psychological abilities we have, I can like live your life psychologically and feel your feelings psychologically. But I'm not saying that this means to be emotionally cold or to move into a place of, I don't care about you, that we still can nurture an overall culture of empathy, okay? But there's something that I think it's good to understand the different circuitry. And I've found more and more and more as a client, as a clinician, as a trainer of, I'm on many levels here, as a trainer of clinicians, the more I get into this compassionate, almost gentle removal, I have so much more bandwidth to work with a lot of different clients. And it's not an unfeeling place, but it is a sense of a little bit of removal. So confronting thought here, compassion over empathy. Not sure what people think about that. Thoughts on that? I'm curious if anyone else has started looking at this research or any questions on that. Please know I'm not trying to say be a baddie.
I'd love to make a comment if I could.
Please, yes.
So it's Mark Potter, and thank you so much. This is a wonderful training. I'm the coordinator for mindfulness-based programming for Intermountain employees, and this has been my work and life for the last 15 years or so.
My goodness.
And there's a program through Stanford, developed at Stanford, Compassion Cultivation Training, an 8-week mindfulness-based course. And I did the teacher training thing for a year. And Kelly McConaughey, who some people may know the name, she did some of the initial research in this. And one of the things that I teach folks in healthcare is that there are two kinds of empathy. One is conceptual, where I'm imagining what it's like to be in your shoes and being a single parent who's getting an appendectomy or whatever it may be. And there's an emotional empathy. And the patient, they don't need me to feel, to take on all the burden of everything they're going through. Me breaking into tears doesn't help anything. But it is, that's where mindfulness again comes in, helping us to down regulate and manage our own emotion. And it allows us to catch a little bit of their suffering, just a tiny taste, so that we can help them wisely. But the conceptual empathy, that's where we load up. That's what's really helpful to people. And we know that as therapists, we know that. So, and I just loved that you presented this stuff. That's terrific. Not many folks are aware of that, and thank you, appreciate it. Thanks for today.
You say John? Was that John?
Mark.
Mark. Oh, I'm so sorry. Just guessed the biblical name. Mark.
We're
Mark,
all
thanks so much for sharing that. I would love to hear more about that. Can you say, was that compassion motivated training? Is that what you said?
compassion cultivation training,
Compassion cultivation training.
CCT, and they're kind of we hate for there to be competitors in this world, but they're kind of the counter to UC San Diego's mindfulness-based self-compassion, although I think they go together brilliantly. So it's kind of along those lines. Anyway, yes, and I would love to visit offline sometime. I'm delighted with all that you're doing, and thank you and congratulations.
Mark, thank you so much. And if either Mark or anyone who heard that, just because I'm teaching here, can put that in the chat, compassion cultivation training. I'm going to check that out myself. I would love to connect and talk to you. Yeah, this was one that there's that classic Brene Brown video we show, like empathy versus sympathy. And I please no, I'm not trying to say that. And I love the nuance that you offered, or maybe you looking at this slide, maybe a new way I could write the slide is like empathy version 1 over empathy version 2, or let me see if I get this right. Conceptual empathy over emotional empathy. Right. And that's just helped me so much. But for me, as I'm historically a people pleaser, as I think many of us in our profession are, I could kind of come in with like, if I'm not feeling your emotions, am I bad? Right. If I'm not, and sometimes people want to pull us into feeling that. Can't you feel that? Aren't you angry with me? Like they vent, but then they want something from me. And there's something just really nice, just being like, yeah, I can totally be here for your feelings. And in fact, if anything, I'm honoring them all the more by not being overtaken by them. So I can say, yeah, like it's that wonderful, here's some play therapy 101, just witnessing. Yeah, child-centered play therapy, just witnessing. Yeah, just you are really, really angry about that. You're really activated around that. I can see that. I can sense that. And I'm with you, not cold or distant or pulling away from you, but I'm staying in a place of honoring that I don't want to say removal. I've been using that word. Maybe honoring that difference, honoring the differentiation. And for those of you who are like, okay, I already know all of this, or this is a new way to think about this, and speaking for myself also, it's like, okay, this is all fine and well, but am I actually going to use this in my practice? Because for those of us who've been practicing for about 10 plus years, or even 1 year, right? Even my students, like we get really entrenched. This is what I do. And so kind of in fact, this might be a good time to do this. We've got about 10 minutes left. I've covered most of what we wanted to cover here, but this might be a little bit of a different practice where we might sit back and just note here, so that we don't have to do this at the very end, something that you are taking from this discussion. Could be from the comments, could be something we talked about here that you're like, I really, really want to apply this now in my work. And I'll do this here with you. We'll just take a bit of time. I maybe want to go learn something about this, or I want to change just something I'm doing. For those of us who are getting lost in that, anchor yourself in a client, one client. Think about that one client. And whatever client comes to your mind, that'll kind of guide you. What is something that came to your mind, guided by something that Kelly or Mary Jean or Mark or anyone else shared in the comments, or that I shared, like, or something that you really rebelled against what someone said, right? Like something that, just an invitation to check in. I'll do this with you. You know, as we're doing this practice, if you're imagining a client, let's just do a quick, just differentiation piece. We're just giving space. I just sometimes picture myself staying with the person in a room, but just we're sitting on different sides. So really that almost cheesy namaste. I honor you, but you are not me. I honor all of you and in all of you, and also you are not me. And I'm removing. I'm differentiating. Let's stay there with that word. I'm differentiating. So I can sit with you as me. Really take as much time as you would like in this practice. Just picturing sitting with that person. Again, some grounding for those of us who would like to. Just pressing feet down or just noticing any sensation. This is the integrative piece. Those who want to bring in breathing. Go ahead and bring in breathing. And then just a gentle, very contextual guided imagery. Just picturing you with the client and anything that helps just unfuse. Might be two branches of that tree that have kind of wrapped around. Not wrong that they did that. Can we just gently unfuse them, gently untie that knot? This could be not a clinical relationship. It could be a parent-child or partner or collegial relationship that's gotten a little bit fused, a little bit wrapped around. Honoring both branches as we just pull those apart. Going back to those who want a little bit more literal or direct practice here, you might even picture yourself in the session with the client. Whatever, you'll let them sit where they want to sit, but notice where you would like to sit and the distance that you want for your own differentiation and protection. Picturing that internally in the internal landscape. Take a couple more breaths here. We're going to do something for those of you who are doing this practice. We're going to do something here. We're going to move into a quick liminal space between this practice and more active thinking. So kind of a handoff space. We might say, okay, what am I taking from this practice, also from this training, that I'm moving forward into my life? So you might kind of gently come out. This might be the right after the Shavasana of yoga, kind of the sitting up stance. But we're not quite out of the practice. In this little bit of liminal space, what am I taking from this practice? I want to move more actively into prefrontal world. Noting that internally, writing that down if you would like. Another few breaths here as people who are doing the practice more fully come out of it. And for those of you who like, you can go back and watch this video and maybe try some of these few practices, or you might think about what you would like to do. This is what I often do is I'll just kind of talk. And part of it is just like words, doesn't matter. At this point, you've been listening to me for so long. It's like just words. Anything that gives you now the space and presence and ability to come back in. One thing that I've said to clients recently that seems to resonate, is particular with clients coming out of any kind of coercive situation is noticing what brings you peace and empowerment. Peace and empowerment. So that might be an invitation for us at the end of our training today and moving into more active work. What's going to bring you into a place of peace plus empowerment? Okay, one but not the other feels a little lopsided, but when we have the two of them together, it can really guide us forward. And we could say that a lot of different ways. I'm sure you all say that in different interesting ways with your clients, but peace and empowerment. All right. We won't have time for this practice, but many of us know this practice, loving kindness meditation. Go back and look at this. Notice that as you do this, kind of go through the columns here. So self, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I be safe. Loved one, may you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be safe, may you live with ease. Neutral person, neutral person. Notice how we're moving from proximity, loved one, neutral, to a difficult person. May they be happy. You might think about some politicians, some of us do this practice. May they be happy. May they be healthy. May they be safe. May they live with ease. And then all beings, may all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be safe. May all beings live with ease. Really doing this practice extended and giving enough time to really picture. It takes about 20 to 30 minutes. So you might, if you have a little bit of time after today, this might be one to launch into. This is a real kind of core practice within Buddhist work. Already went through this slide, and I think, wow, we're right on time. This went by really fast for me. May not have gone by as fast for some of you listening to me, but love this. We already did the consolidation piece. That's kind of one thing I wanted to talk about. Let me just highlight one slide here. I won't have time, unfortunately, to really unpack this, but this is from Dan Siegel's The Mindful Therapist book. You can take a picture, a screenshot, or you can come back to this later. Well, we've got a few minutes. I'll just unpack this very quickly. Don't worry about this complicated thing. I'll explain this to clients. I explain this to students sometimes. You have neural firing that happens. So you just think about any internal activation, neural firing. What Dr. Siegel highlights is that if we do mindfulness practice, maybe we'll wrap up with this thought, that brings us back down to an open plane of possibility in terms of our neurological reality, rather than what many of us do, which is living triggered, living on a plateau of probability. So when we're on that plateau of probability, and I'm already scanning for the thing, right? I'm already thinking about the thing, then the peak of activation is going to be more often. Now, it's not to say we can't peak all the way into anxiety or trigger from an open plane of possibility, but it's probably going to be less likely to happen as often. We're probably peaking when we're already living in more reduced, narrowed, what's the term? Window of tolerance, more of a narrowed window of tolerance. So we're expanding that window of tolerance, getting into more of an open plane of possibility. And then from that place, we have our peaks come more naturally, more organically. Okay, well, that might be a good place to wrap up. It makes me feel completist that we got through everything. But let me just share this here at the end. Really happy to connect in any way. Like I said at the beginning, do not consider myself an expert on this, but it was nice to host the conversation. I really invite everyone to connect with people who shared here already, or if you shared in the comments. 2 different emails you can reach me at there. One's more academically focused, one's going to be a little bit more private practice or personally focused. Feel free to reach out to me on either. And I arrived at the end. I think we're at 1:59 my time. I'm a little later here. So it was such a delight to be with you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Doug.
Joining.
Are you in a rush? I mean, I do have a question that I can pull up. I mean, people can go ahead and go if they need
Yes.
to, but if you've got time.
I'm happy as long as everyone feels like they're okay to leave. They don't, if you stay.
Right, exactly. Just make sure, if you guys are leaving, make sure to grab that evaluation link in the chat that Autumn has been putting in. And we appreciate you all being here. If you want to stay, I've got one more question I'm going to ask him that somebody has asked. So hopefully they're still on. And we'll see you next month. This question
Thank you, everyone
is,
who's attending.
I feel like I do pretty well balancing with clients, the idea of compassion versus empathy, but I find it harder to do with my family. How do you recommend addressing that?
Oh, well, now that I'm done with this and we're just chatting,
Yeah.
I would say I need that. Whatever you come up with, I need it myself. It's so hard.
That's what I thought too. I thought, I want to know this too.
Like if we want to get geeky now, those of us who are hanging out afterwards for the after party for this happy hour, I think Sue Johnson, who's founded emotion focused therapy, recently passed away, and I loved her work. I got trained as an emotion focused couples therapist. She kind of had a low key famous debate with Richard Schwartz, where she was like, people really need this secure attachment to flourish in their lives. And Schwartz, in his book, You Are the One You've Been Waiting For, actually kind of pushes back against that and says, no, actually, you need to be, in his words, the primary caretaker of your parts. And then your partner becomes the secondary caretaker of your parts. So I have found IFS to be, at least for me currently in my own practice and with clients, my own in personal practice as a client and with my clients, it's just a nice framework to say I have a part of me that's having a really hard time unfusing or differentiating from my spouse or from my child or something, but myself is unfused. And so that's been a nice framework for me. And then myself can take care of whatever part is getting triggered or the exile or the protector. So I might, over time, I've kind of gone from Sue Johnson's camp over a little bit more into Schwartz's camp. Doesn't mean I don't believe, it doesn't mean I don't believe in attachment theory. I just don't know that I believe that as adults, we have to have the same type of same like level of attachment, this cradle to grave attachment figure thing. I don't know. I'm becoming a little bit agnostic about that, at least in terms of what a toddler needs or a young child needs. Right. So I don't know. I'm curious what other people think. We're just hanging out.
It looks like Daryl has something to say. Go for it.
Yeah, I love this discussion. So I use a lot of Doug, you mentioned differentiation quite a few times. So I'm a big fan of Bowen family systems, and I use differentiation quite a bit in my work as well as my personal life. And so my practice my clinic emotional freedom child and family counseling really centers around kind of that deeper emotional kind of stuff. And so for me, I'm kind of similar with you. So I've looked at, the EFT kind of approach and the attachment, needing that attachment, but to me, it still feels like you're a little more dependent on someone else to be okay. So I like the differentiated approach where, you find a way to be self-sustained, self-validated, be able to self-soothe, to a lot of emotional self-reliance is what I call it. Because then whatever happens to you, you have the ability to manage that internally, and you can still lean on other people if you need support, but you don't need them. So for my clients, I say it's one thing to want the support, but it's a different thing to need it to be okay. And so I think, the question with family is a really great one because that's where we're the most triggered. That's where we feel the most vulnerable. That's where we feel, a lot of our emotional buttons coming up. And so what I think it highlights for us is internal work that's still there for us to do. Try to, look at how we get triggered and how to manage that and to be able to stay in a better state, emotionally and mentally for ourselves.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Thanks so much, Daryl.
Awesome.
Daryl, where do you work? I'm curious.
So I have my own practice. I'm the director of my own clinic, Emotional Freedom Child Family Counseling. So I was actually at UVU. I taught that MSW program there till a year and a half ago.
Oh,
And
cool.
so I'm working for myself full time. I've got a couple of therapists working for me, and I'm looking at expanding that. And then I'm based in Provo. So we do child play therapy, and we do individual therapy with teens and adults. We do emotional work with all ages. And yeah, a lot of cool stuff.
Cool. That's cool. Yeah, great to meet you. Thanks for sharing.
I'm curious, Daryl, do you find that you are your own hardest boss?
That's a great question. And the answer is no, because
That's
I've
good.
really, I've been wanting to be on my own and studied entrepreneurship for almost 10 years. So I've really I think put myself in a place mentally that when the time came for that to happen, I think I understood the principles of how to do it the right way and to stay in focus and creation and to be able to enjoy the journey. But you're right, a lot of people get into that space and they get the stress and they push and they drive and a lot of mental habits come up that really is
Yeah.
that happiness and self-esteem and things like that. So I can't say those never come up for me, but I'm hopefully aware enough about those that I can, keep away from that most of the time.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Oh, this has been wonderful. Thank you, thank you. Thank you
this is so great.
much. We really appreciate it. I think this is just one of those things, you're right, we're seeing it everywhere, but we're not doing it. And
Yeah, yeah,
we're not really understanding it, and we're not utilizing this amazing part of our work or just part of being human, and I think that this has been really good to break it down, and it's not as hard as we think it is.
And,
Yeah.
and Doug, if you do me a favor, when you see your social work faculty next, tell them I say hi.
I will.
But most of them are still my colleagues. So I miss
Oh,
them.
yeah, I will. Thanks so much.
Mhm.
Alan is telling you hi online, Daryl.
Okay, hey,
yeah.
how you doing, Alan? Alan's one of my buds too.
Well,
All right, well, we're gonna let you go, but thank you again.
thank you so much.
This has been
Thank you so
so
much.
great. And then we'll be in touch about getting, those slides. I did have some people ask if they also could get kind of those exercises that you were doing. I don't know if that's something that's possible or not. I told them I would ask. So
Yeah, well, which the
I think it was
nerve-
more the very first one, just kind of you didn't have on the screen.
Oh yeah, I just made that up.
I know. Well, that's why I thought they're so similar. It's kind of, but I
Yeah,
told them I'd ask. So, but yeah, I mean, I think most of them were on there, the later ones,
Yeah.
and so that's great. But we'll get those.
yeah, I will send a link to
Yeah.
that right now. And was this kind of what we wanted to do? Is this
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
and I will send you the information from the feedback form so you can see, I mean,
Great.
lots of wonderful comments in the chat, just so you know.
Okay, good.
So if you
Right.
want it, we'll leave this open for a little bit longer, just so people can get that evaluation link. If you want to stay on and go back and look, you can, in the chat, or I'll just.
Okay, yeah, I'll scroll through the chat real quick
Okay.
and then.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Appreciate it. Okay,
Thank you.
bye-bye, everybody.